We're going to call to order the special meeting of the Planning Commission, Wednesday, May 17, 2017. We stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, item number 2, audience comments, not on the agenda. Is that you?
That's me, right?
Sweet.
Yes,
No, I'm not, that's just a discussion, it's not a public hearing.
on the sign code.
On the sign code. So can I
He
filibuster?
can speak to the sign code.
Sure, all right, okay.
Yeah.
Not
Are
a,
you going to read from the phone?
it's not a
book?
public
Do
hearing,
they
so
still
he's just
make
having
those?
comments.
Yeah.
But it's on the
Yeah, they
agenda.
do. So anyways, I'm here,
You have to say who you are.
Yeah, so
Your address.
my name is Matt Murphy, I'm the Executive Director for the Port Orchard Chamber of Commerce. And I'm here today just to say a few words about the sign code that I think you have before you. I know you're just discussing it today, but I can say that there's a group of citizens and business owners that have been working on that since September. I was on that committee. I feel you guys is paying for some of the stuff that you have to deal with in the process. But I can say that we went through that thing word for word, taking into consideration the recent Supreme Court ruling, taking into consideration that being pro-business, I have to admit that I'm strongly against any regulation that limits the ability of a business to succeed. I compromised, some other people compromised, so a lot of work went into this, and I haven't had an opportunity to see any of the public comments on it yet, but take that into consideration that, a lot of individuals, we've been meeting a long time putting that together, so that's all I have on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other audience members, we're going to move on to number 3, the business items. Do you want to speak before I open the public hearing, or do you want me to?
Go ahead and open the public hearing on the,
Okay. So I'm going to open the public hearing for draft Title 20. Did you want to speak
on
about draft 20? Okay.
Okay.
So seeing no audience members that wish to speak on it, I'm going to close the public hearing. Okay.
All right. So business item 3B is draft Title 20, and so we've all been working on this for a very long time. I think it's been 2 years. I think everybody on the Planning Commission has been involved since the beginning of on this. We wanted to have a second public hearing because subsequent to the 60-day public comment period, we had additional revisions. And then in addition to that, we sent out a packet that were some hearing examiner recommendations. He took the final step and went through our code, just looking for anything that stood out to him, and he pointed out a handful of items that needed to be addressed. And so there's a packet on your table tonight that is the draft Title 20 hearing examiner and other recommended changes. And we're asking the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the City Council to approve the draft Title 20, including the hearing examiner and other recommendations as provided. And just real quick, the significant revisions, and we've documented all of this in the comment matrix that's before you, which is pushing 50 pages, if I'm not mistaken. A lot of that is definitions, and we realized that we had missed the step of consolidating the old and the new definitions, and so we spent a lot of time in the last month going through all of those. We found 30-something words that were defined but not used anywhere in the code. We found other duplicate definitions that were defined in multiple places and inconsistent, and so we had to do a lot of work to clean that up. And along the way, we also found some minor things here and there in the code that we wanted to fix. Nothing real substantive. It's mostly just the wording and making the code work. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the materials, either the hearing examiner recommendation or the changes that initially went out in the packet. And if there are no questions, it's my recommendation that we recommend this for approval and that the Planning Commission vote that way tonight.
think the amount of work that staff has put into this is pretty amazing. Like, I know we've had a lot of meetings on it, but like, we show up for meetings and we read stuff. You guys are actually putting all this stuff together, so
Yeah.
it's impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's exhausting.
It looks exhausting.
Is there any discussion or anything on it, or
No.
questions?
Myself.
You guys want to talk about our changes? Kind of discuss?
I'm good.
Okay.
So are you looking for a motion?
Yeah, we need a motion, and make sure the motion recommends approval of Title 20, including the amendments as presented in the document titled Hearing Examiner and Other Recommended Changes, May 16, 2007.
So moved.
There you go.
I like your wording.
I don't know what you're reading. What are you reading? What is this?
This is from last meeting.
Well, this is the, so we're reviewing all the changes,
Yeah,
or
I'm
all
just
the, all
reading
the,
this
the public testimony. For,
This.
yes, all the public testimony for the changes in Title 20.
Wasn't there another one of these, though? Wasn't there an email that went out that said there was more comments? Oh, that's what I was looking for. Okay.
I'll second that motion,
That was Stephanie
so we don't
and Trish.
lose track of what we're doing.
Trish and then Stephanie for motion and second.
Oh, that's what I thought it was. Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, so there's you seconded it?
I did.
So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right.
We've killed a lot of trees this year.
So now we're gonna do the sign code?
Yes.
All right, business item number 3, discussion for the draft of the sign code.
Okay, we introduced this issue at our last meeting at the beginning of May, and we distributed copies of the sign code at that time. We haven't made any changes to this since then, and we mostly just wanted to provide you with copies and ask that you study the issue and come tonight, and it's an opportunity just for you to ask any questions that you may have in advance of a public hearing, or if there's any changes that you think need to be included in the draft before it goes to public hearing, we could certainly make those. And so we already kind of gave you the overview of the sign code. Right now, it's just an opportunity for you to ask any questions you have.
Nick, I don't have a copy of that with me. Can I get a copy?
Oh, Carrie, is that the updated one?
It's the same as what we had
Last week? Okay, I got it. Or last month, I got it. Thank you.
Was that last week or last month?
Last month. This month. 2 weeks ago. I don't know.
And really, the issue that we pointed out to you and had suggested that you consider were the portable signs and the feather signs, which we anticipated could be controversial, as well as freestanding sign height, which I think what we have is adequate, but some people may think that more sign height would be better, and so we would anticipate that you would hear about those at a public hearing. But those are really the two items that we probably spent the most time debating in our meetings, especially the feather signs and the A-board portable signs.
Well, I can tell you that it doesn't seem like that long ago that we did that exact same thing. Went through the sign code and had a big community involvement and doing the sign code. And I guess that's just a little pet peeve of mine, is it seems like every time we change planning directors, or we change mayors, or we change something, we go back to the exact same thing that we just spent a lot of time doing again. You know, and we talked about those flag signs and feather signs and all that stuff back then, and you see them all over the place now. And I don't think I mean, they were something that were supposed to be just a temporary, short-term thing. And I know up by A&W at that, they're there all the time, it seems like. So what changes were made to those, to the freeboards, and the feather signs and the temporary signs?
So the feather signs, the initial draft of this that was brought to the sign committee did not include an allowance for any feather signs. And the sign committee felt pretty strongly that feather signs should be allowed. And so they came up with, I think the dimension standard for the feather signs is pretty well vetted, because we had a sign maker who knows how those things come in terms of being manufactured. Really, it was a question of quantity and spacing of signs depending on how much property you have. And so that is a recommendation of the sign committee. It wasn't necessarily something that was brought forward by staff. And in terms of the sign code itself, just keep in mind, this is probably the least favorite thing of any planner to have to work on, because it's the most controversial and complex thing we deal with. This is all from the Supreme Court decision Reed versus Gilbert that was handed down, I think, in 2014 or 2015, that totally invalidated every sign code in the nation, because almost every sign code in the nation had content-based regulations of speech, which are no longer allowed. So this is our attempt to address that court decision, not to impose torture upon ourselves.
Well, I still just have the one comment on section 20.132.190 on digital signs, in terms of them not being allowed in residential zones. We had discussed them being allowed, approved for non-residential uses like churches and schools, but then I tend to think of like this church up here, if they had a big digital sign at night, flashing every 8 seconds, it's a residential neighborhood. How do others feel about that?
That's a comment that I had noted from the last meeting. So
Yes.
that's in my running list of recommended changes from the planning commission. There were, I think, 3 different types of signs that had messages or scrolling that you had wanted to not be allowed in residential zones unless it was an approved non-residential use, like a church or a school.
Right, yes, I'm looking at the notes. My recollection is, my only issue was with the digital signs as opposed to changeable copy signs or electronic message boards, because electronic message boards are already prohibited in residential. But looking at it further and considering that church and school thing, I'm still not sure I'm comfortable with the digital signs even being allowed at a church or a school in a residential neighborhood.
So,
Unless they were like,
Would that be the high school board?
yeah.
Would that be that big high school board?
So that comment, so we've put together a similar comment matrix as we have with the Title 20. And so we've logged the couple of comments we got at the last meeting from the Planning Commission, along with anything that's been submitted by the public. And that comment period is still open, I think, for another week or two before we close that off. And then we'll present that matrix to you at the June 6th meeting, and we'll have a public hearing at that time. And so we'll take public testimony, and we'll add the public testimony to that matrix, and then we'll kind of work through it and figure out which changes are actually the Planning Commission is in favor of making before they recommend approval of a sign code. And the staff will probably have some recommendations ready to go for you, but we want to wait until we have the whole picture of what comments are coming in.
right, makes sense.
Well, my understanding that those digital signs were not allowed in residential zones before, were they? I know that the school got a variance and the fire station got a variance by going some roundabout way through the city council. But it was my understanding before that those weren't allowed in residential areas.
Yeah, and we're gonna, if we're going to allow them in residential areas, we have to explicitly figure out how to allow them, because a variance is not the correct procedure to use to give somebody special privileges under our code to have a digital sign. It wouldn't meet the criteria of our proposed variance code or our existing variance code. So if that happened in the past, it was probably either the code was different or the code was ignored and the council approved something that maybe it shouldn't have. But that only matters if somebody chooses to appeal the decision.
Because I agree. I live across the street from a church.
Yeah. Would you want to look at the red
No.
lights at night?
No.
Yeah, and a church or a school could apply to have their property redesignated from residential to community facility or to commercial or some other use where they're also allowed, but where the sign that they want is allowed. And then the council can have an objective discussion on whether to approve the comp plan amendment and a zoning change, which they have total discretion to approve or deny. But that's different than a variance, because they're giving everything that goes along with the zoning, and it's not a special privilege because everybody else in that zone also gets the same treatment. So I think that churches and fire stations aren't totally, left out just by not, if we choose to just ban them entirely in all residential zones, because they could seek the rezone.
Pretty big process.
All right, we'll have to look at this more in deep depth before June 6th then.
Okay. Any other questions?
Did you want more questions or comments on it, or you wanted them saved until June 6th?
I think if you have questions or comments, you can either provide them now, or if you wanna send them to us in writing, we can put them in the matrix so that they can be shared and we can, provide a thoughtful response.
So is there any more discussion on the sign code right now?
No, I don't have any. You even?
Do you guys have?
Tim, yeah, never mind.
That's me.
Never mind.
Tim, do you have anything else you want to say tonight?
I will not be present for the June 6th meeting. I'll be out of town, but I'll make sure to get all my comments to you in writing then.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
On there? I think the only thing left on the agenda is minutes.
Well, I didn't know if Tim was.
No, I'm just looking at the, because what was happening before we did it last time, and with all deference to the, to the commercial property owners and business owners and things, but what was happening was there were 10 signs down at the end of the street, all portable A-board signs pointing in different directions at different, so that's why we banned them, is because there was 10 of them down, at the end of Kitsap Street. And now it seems like that is completely gone. The ability to
Yeah.
not have them littering basically a street corner.
Well, you're only allowed to have one sign per parcel per street frontage. And so you're not going to have a whole bunch of them on top of each other at any one location. But because we can't regulate content, if List wants to let his allocated sign go to the homemade cafe with an arrow pointing up the hill, he can put that sign out there because we can't regulate the content of that sign. So right now it's one sign per lot per street frontage.
And
And
not
so-
in the city right-of-ways or the city.
And exactly, it's got to be, unless you get a right-of-way use permit, which a right-of-way use permit is something that the Public Works Director approves, and he's going to evaluate safety, whether ADA passage, the widths are maintained so that somebody can get around the sign. And so in many places, there isn't even sufficient room for an A-board sign within the right-of-way, but they could occur on a limited basis, but that's going to be an extra fee for that person versus just putting it on the back of the sidewalk on their lot.
So going back to what you said about Dick Vallis, I thought there was, so he has a sign on a pole, and then he has his signs on his buildings. I always thought that you could only have a certain square footage of sign per your building. And, because I remember the guy down here at Allstate wanted to do his building up, how the other Allstate agents do it, and he was not allowed to do it because he was taking up too much of, he didn't have enough space to do exactly how the other ones do it. So would that still count with Dick Vallis down there as the example, to be able to put an A-frame board up for the homemade cafe?
So Dick Valist is, he's non-conforming on wall sign and on freestanding signs because he has more signage than he's allowed. But he is conforming on A-board signs. So he could add the A-board, but he can't increase his wall signage or his freestanding signage because he would have to bring that into conformance with our code.
So how, being he just redid his lot, how did he get that then?
Because those signs were already in existence. The second sign that's down there, he changed out the panel, but that was for the old mini mart.
Okay.
And because we can't regulate the content of the sign, just because the old sign said mini mart meant that we can't say that it can't say Dick Vallis now because the sign itself,
Okay.
is legally non-conforming, and we can't look at the words on it to determine whether or not the business has changed.
Okay.
Interesting.
But he could advertise for somebody else?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Although the only gray area in this is marijuana stores because there are RCWs that restrict speech when it comes to recreational marijuana, but the Cannabis and Liquor Control Board doesn't seem to enforce those rules, and that's an interesting federal and state legal question that I'm not equipped to answer.
So do we still have someone that does code enforcement?
Yes. And as far as signage goes, we've been really reluctant to enforce a pretty big portion of our sign code because it's unclear whether certain provisions are constitutional or not. And so unless something that requires a building permit gets put up illegally, in which case then it's a life safety issue, we're generally not pursuing that except where we know the regulation is content neutral. So the signs in the right-of-way, at first our attorney advised us that we should not enforce that as well because there were two exceptions there in that code, but later decided that we could enforce that because it is applied to every sign that gets put in the right-of-way. So we are still enforcing that, but in terms of temporary signs, banners, things of that nature, just because somebody puts one up doesn't mean it has a legal right to exist because the city's never issued a decision or a permit to approve it. And as soon as we have a new sign code, those signs will be illegal and non-conforming and will have to come down. And so we may have to step up code enforcement of anything that's been put up that doesn't conform to the code that wasn't issued a permit.
Okay. And then what about on, during the week is fine, but Saturday is a whole different story downtown with signs everywhere. Can the police, if they wanted to, enforce that? Or is that only done by code enforcement during the week?
It's only done by code enforcement during the week unless code enforcement coordinates with the police to do a special enforcement over the weekend. But
Okay.
we would have to have somebody on duty who is familiar with the sign code and how to enforce the zoning rules, which the police don't get involved in zoning enforcement. So it's, I'm sure that sort of thing happens over the weekend. I've just never seen it because I've only been here a couple of times on the weekend.
That's all.
You could take pictures.
No,
and
I
then
mean,
send it to the
no,
code
I just
enforcement.
wondered. It's fine, I don't really care. I mean, I care, but it's fine.
So Nick, you mentioned the marijuana companies, or, what are they not allowed to put on a sign?
I believe that state law still says that they can't have a depiction of marijuana products on there, so a marijuana leaf on a sign is not supposed to be allowed. I think that,
It's not supposed to be anything that would be appealing to children. And I've seen a number that look kind of cartoony and, yeah.
I've seen signs with pot leaves on
There's
them,
supposed to be
too.
a distance
Yeah.
between them and certain types of facilities, even for their advertising, which I don't think they're meeting either.
yeah, so I think there's a real lack of enforcement from the state on the rules that they put in place for those signs, but, we don't see the sign enforcement. We regulate the type of sign in accordance with our sign code, but we're not gonna get involved in regulating the content, just because it's a really gray area.
Any other questions?
I think cheap weed appeals to children.
The guy flipping the sign in the worst. Like, that guy has a
He's
lot of
pretty
energy.
talented. All right. Any more?
That's it.
Okay, so next is approval of the minutes from May 2nd.
I have one alteration to make, just for the record. Section D, where it states that I asked that sections on changeable copy signs, digital copy signs, electronic message boards be revised. It was my recollection it was actually just on the digital copy signs. So if changeable copy signs and electronic message boards could be struck from that. Unless you guys have that actually recorded and my memory's just failing.
I think I remembered them all, but if you didn't think you said that, or you preferred that it be changed, we can change it.
I suppose it's no matter. Well, it's already not allowed on electronic, correct? In residential areas?
Digital,
Electronic, yeah, prohibit in residential. Carrie, if you would, just make it the digital copy signs.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll change that.
Thank you very much.
And I'd like to move to approve the minutes as amended by Commissioner Bailey.
Is there a second? Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those
Oh,
opposed?
I, sorry, I said, what? Second,
I thought you,
yeah.
I thought that's what you meant.
I know, me too.
We all thought that's what you meant, so we just took,
Oh my God.
Did you mean that?
Yeah, I meant, yeah, second.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right.
Now
So,
aye.
all those opposed? Nothing.
Ah,
So,
geez.
real quick before we adjourn, don't forget about our little field trip that we want to go on.
We're going to Jamaica?
Yes, yes. Sometime this summer, I thought we would go give a tour of the city again, like we used to get to
Oh,
do.
yeah.
Oh, fun.
can you write down a note? We don't need to
Sorry.
He was hoping we forgot.
Release van,
Work release.
community service van.
Oh,
When did this come up as a topic of conversation last month?
Yeah, we
You
talked
were
about
on
it.
that one meeting.
Oh, that was April, okay.
We used to get to go on tours of the city before the hearing examiner.
did we get plastic flip-flops?
Wouldn't that be fun?
we can pick up garbage while we're doing it.
I don't know about you, but I'm gonna wear one of those
So is this
helmets
for
that
next
have
month,
drinks
or-
right
Okay,
here.
Sometime we will schedule this.
we're adjourned.
All right.
We don't need the next, you said on the 30th or something, or we don't need that one?
Not meeting on the 30th, we will meet on the 6th at our regular meeting, and then you're off for the July 4th meeting.
Okay.
Hey, one last question. Is it okay to recycle this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Unless you've created public records, in which case you need to preserve those.